So, hello and welcome everybody to the 8th in our series of GSMA Showcase Live events. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules and for joining us here today. I'm very pleased to welcome representatives from across the world who shall be presenting in this session. For those who don't know me, my name is Conor Dempsey from GSMA Services, and my primary role is to ensure our customers, partners, and members are leveraging the full suite of services available to help the mobile industry as a whole. We have a great session ahead of us, the aim of which is to help you, your team, your company to plan more effectively, reduce costs, and increase revenue and improve your customer experiences. We have some wonderful speakers who are going to share their insights on the impact of network sunsetting, plus share their experiences and actions to help you plan plus execute VoLTE more effectively. As a result, we have an action-packed agenda with each session lasting approximately 10 minutes. The first session is from Emmanuel from GSMA Intelligence, who's going to provide key insights on the current statistics of 2G, 3G planned network closures and VoLTE challenges caused by these closures. After which, I'm delighted to say we had Eddie Goffin, Technical Interconnection Leader from Orange Group, who should provide an update on the Emergency VoLTE GSMA Board Task Force, which was set up last year, plus share the recommendations from this task force. Then we have Wayne Cutler, our GSMA Technical Director, who shall explain how GSMA interoperability testing can help iron out VoLTE challenges when sunsetting 2G and 3G, both from an MNO perspective and an OEM perspective. Last but no means least, we have Oswaldo, Senior Core Network Manager from Altan Redes, who shall provide real-life example on how Altan Redes planned for 2G, 3G sunsetting and discuss how they ensured a smooth transition to VoLTE. At the end, we have a Q&A session where we will look to address and answer any questions that arise. Plus, to make you aware that this session is being recorded and we'll be able to share all the content post-event. With that, I would ask you not to be shy, put all your questions in the right-hand chat and we'll address them at the end. So please, for the next 55 minutes, try to resist the temptation to do emails, use your phone, do your shopping, and please do listen, do get involved, and do ask questions. To kick things off, I would like you all to participate in our poll questionnaires throughout the session. So poll 1 is going to appear now. Please do press your button and participate as requested. With that, I'd like to hand over to Emmanuel from GSMA Intelligence. Emmanuel, over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Conor. Hopefully you can see me and hear me right now. And as Conor mentioned, I work at the GSMA Intelligence as a lead analyst. And in the next probably 10 minutes, I will give you a quick introduction about the recent statistics we have on VoLTE and 2G, 3G shutdowns and give you a few words about local and global trends and regional trends as well. So as you can see in the first slide, we believe that the number of cellular connections will continue to increase, reaching roughly 14 billion by the end of 2027. And we can also expect that mobile data traffic will continue to increase. And by the end of 2026, it's going to be more than half of the data traffic will be 5G, purely 5G. So operators require new approaches to manage costs and reduce this kind of operational costs. On the next slide, you can see an overview about the status of the global connections here. So you can see a dotted red line in the graph on the right side. This is where we are right now. And immediately you can see that we are in a multi-technological environment and running 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G at the same time these days. And we expect that despite the number of 2G, 3G connections will decrease, but it will still have an important role in the global wireless industry as well. So we need to coexist in the next years as well. 2G, 3G won't disappear fully from the global scale. And on the next slide, you can see a status report about VoLTE, and we published the report roughly half year ago for VoLTE's 10th birthday, and we have some fresh data on that report as well. So you can see that the number of VoLTE connections reached 4 billion by the end of last year, and we expect that it's going to continue increase. And the regional distribution of the VoLTE connections is uneven. So while some regions such North America have over 80% VoLTE penetration, Sub-Saharan Africa, we didn't reach 7% yet. And we expect by 2027, by the end of 2025, we're going to have 7% in some region, but Europe is kind of like almost reaching 80% as well. So there are huge regional differences, and the next region where we expect that VoLTE will improve is the developing markets. But we will need VoLTE to shut down parallel with the legacy networks and make sure that this transition is seamless. In the next slide, there is a summary about network shutdowns, and we monitor the number of network shutdowns globally, and we monitor the news and also announcements, and you can see on the left side of the graph the number of network shutdowns and announcements, and you can see this huge peak this year. It's mostly about Asian operators here. So in the right side of the slide, you can see a regional breakdown. So you can see that there is this kind of path evolution, but usually all the regions follow. And the little teal color is on the right side is North America. And you can see that they are at the forefront of 2G, 3G shutdowns. So there is a significant amount of experience and knowledge what the global community can learn from American operators. How did they shut down 2G, 3G, and what are the biggest mistakes and takeaways. So I think there is, first of all, highlight there is kind of path what most of the operators and regions follow if you want to shut down 2G, 3G, and there is significant amount of experience you can learn from North American operators. But you can also see European operators are very active to shut down 2G and 3G. One thing to highlight is in Europe, operators started with 3G, most of the operator, while in other part of the world, operators announcing and shutting down 2G first. So that's, I think it's very interesting why we start with 3G. And if you take a look, you can see that there is a significant amount of 2G contracts and IoT contracts where shows that 2G is still needed and it will be needed, like there are like long contracts. And on the other side, Europe has very high fiber penetration. So you can see that mostly using 4G for the fiber layer. So no need to keep another data layer like 3G. 3G connections are very, number of 3G connections are very low in Europe, and it's not that relevant. So operators started to shut down 3G first in Europe, while in other parts of the world usually start with 2G. And 2G and 4G and 5G is actually complementing each other in many sense. And 2G can serve in Europe as a coverage layer and having a different layer for data. So we know that we're going to live in this kind of environment where running 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G in most of the areas, and there are operators actively planning their shutdowns. And what's next? And in the next slide, you can see how do we see what are the prerequisites for 2G and 3G. So what did we learn? Because what do you need if you want to shut down? And you need kind of terminal support, which will be able to handle VoLTE. And Apple was the last big device manufacturer who basically made VoLTE a basic setting 2019. And this was very important in many mature markets where Apple has over 40% market share, such as the UK or Europe, in many European markets, or in the US with over 45% Apple market share. So this also helped to, if you want to shut down 2G, 3G well, you need to keep this kind of, you need to show that voice will obviously work, and that's why VoLTE is essential. On the other hand, optimization was a very important topic in the beginning. And there was some level of customer complaint in the early 2010s about the quality of voice when VoLTE was introduced, but this has been over, and most of the network operators optimize their 4G and 5G networks now enough that the quality and basic customer satisfaction KPIs are very good for VoLTE networks. And last but not least is coverage. So after terminal support and good quality network optimization, you need to have a significant amount of coverage to make sure that you can shut down 2G and 3G. And globally, we reached 40 to 92% of 4G coverage by population. So this means that there is a good base to build in, and when you have all these three, you can think and you can start shutting down 2G, 3G. In the next slide, there will be a overview about VoLTE's global march. And as I mentioned, VoLTE is 10 years old now, a bit more than 10 years old. And you can see the number of connections here and what do we forecast for VoLTE. And we expect that VoLTE continue to grow and continue to reach 5 billion connections globally by 2025. And on the right side, you see the penetration as well. And this means that globally we will reach close to 60% by the end of 2025. This means that we're going to slowly but make sure that it's here, and voice over LTE will slowly but overcome in many other regions as well, in developing regions. There was some bottlenecks in the beginning, such as price of devices, and this could be still an issue in many areas, where the handset price was one of the most important bottleneck. But as we have now wide range of devices over on the range that it's more affordable, this also improves penetrations in regions in South America or Sub-Saharan Africa or Southeast Asia. So this is less of a bottleneck these days for VoLTE. In the next slide, there will be a short summary about what did we learn and what, after we discussed with mobile operators who have great examples, we wanted to give you a summary, what are the most important takeaways. And one of them is think early. So we really recommend operators and it's highly advised to think and plan and inform your customer base as early as possible if you want to shut down 2G, 3G and focus more on VoLTE. Secondly, I think it's also very important to constantly monitor and improve user experience as well. And real-time dashboards can help operators to to monitor the quality of the service and immediately help if they see any issues or if they see any problems there, and decrease churn as well with this. And third, and there was a huge amount of skepticism around revenue generating use cases for new advanced VoLTE system, and there is a lot of skepticism, but we can see more and more examples how operators actually can offer added advanced services for voice and monetize this. So interactive calls or HD video calls can actually generate revenue for mobile operators. In the next slide, I actually show, I think, a few examples here. So we found 6 opportunities in front VoLTE, and you can see here HD calling, enriched calling, depends how a vendor calls it. Great examples for enterprise communication as well. And despite voice is usually not the sexiest part of the discussed topics, unlike edge computing or slicing, but I think it's still a very important part of mobile operators' strategy, revenue still, and also that's still a foundation, an universal system that what cornerstone still of the offer services for mobile operators, and we expect that there will be new advanced services for voice as well. And I think that was my last slide. So I would like to invite Eddie Goffin, who is a technical interconnection leader at Orange Group, and I think he will be the next presenter. So thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach us out now in the end of the session, and I will do my best to answer them. So thanks for your time and your future questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. Eddie, just before you start, okay, I just want to remind people that on the top bar, there's a Q&A button. So we have got some questions in already, but we want you to get the most value out of this session. So please put your questions in there. And then also we shall be sending the slides post-event. But yeah, Eddie, back to you, sir.
Thank you. I will just present myself, Eddie Goffin. I'm working for Orange Corporates Group in the innovation department. I am in charge of roaming and interconnection architectures definition. And in this context, a large part of my job is to support Orange affiliate for VoLTE roaming opening. In this context, last year, with the first closure of 2G, 3G networks, especially in US markets, we observe different issues regarding the access to emergency services. The goal of this short presentation is to share with you the different issues that we facing and the job done at the GSMA to find a way to avoid this kind of issue in the futures. Regarding the issue that we detect, I've just listed an example of 4 major issues that we detect. We will review this issue in detail in the next slide. Let me just say that we have 2 kind of origin of issue. One is the operator request to OEM, and another one is the OEM implementation of SIP in the device himself. From my point of view as mobile operators, if I decide to close my 2G, 3G networks, it's mandatory for me to assure access to emergency services to all voice over LTE capable device. For sure, it is mandatory to use voice over LTE technology after 2G, 3G sunsets. And also in the context of roaming, be sure that the access to the emergency center is possible for my customers, but also for roomers, whatever if the roomers have a real rooming agreement or not. It's mandatory for me to be able to set an emergency sessions if requested by the customers. Then on the next slide, we will review together an example of issue that we detect. Just before starting the description, it's important to mention that it's not generic, because the issue that we detect depends of the device himself, the operating system, the release of the operating system. Then it was very complicated when we start to detect issue to have a clear visibility on the real impact on the markets. It's really depending of couple of factors. First issue that we detect, it's coming from a request of mobile operators to OEM. They request to use only one IP stack on the device. With the closure of 2G, 3G networks on the US market, we're facing the first issue. Indeed, access to emergency services on the US market is only possible using IPv6, and device is locked on IPv4. Then it was impossible to establish an emergency session in this context. The way to solve is simple. Please follow the recommendation provided by the GSMA in IR 92, requesting for the UE to support IPv4 and IPv6 stack, and please stop mobile operators to request OEM to limit the service to only one stack. It's the first issue that we detect. I have put a camera on the pictures. You can see on the core network, on the IMS core networks, the request for the session establishments, but the session is not established. But we have the possibility to monitor the issue. Next slide and next problem that we detect. This issue is also coming from mobile operator request to OEM, requesting to block the IMS roaming service to the customers. Then in this context, no possibility to put in place roaming agreements, no possibility to set up a voice over LTE session, but moreover, no possibility to place an emergency call because the service is fully locked by the device himself. In this context, my camera is red because no request is forwarded by the device to the core networks. Then it's a real issue because we don't have the possibility to monitor this kind of issue. The recommendation is also to request to mobile operators to stop to request OEM to block voice over LTE roaming. In the next slide, we will describe issue coming directly from the OEM implementation of voice over LTE services. In this context, the user in the visited networks don't have voice over LTE service open in the home networks. It means that no qualification of IMS core networks in the home networks. And for the device maker, MCC, MNC, for these operators, don't have voice over LTE service qualified. Then no access to voice over LTE services. In case of roaming on networks with 2G, 3G sunsets, no VoLTE possible and authorized by the device for the user, but no possible setup of emergency access to. It's blocking directly inside the device due to the fact that user is not part of home networks using voice over LTE services. Red camera for this use case, because once again, no emergency setup is sent from the device to the networks. No possibility for the core networks to monitor this kind of issue. Really a big problem. We don't have possibility to monitor issue and problem with customers on the networks. The only way to solve this issue is to request to OEM to update the way to manage this aspect, and in case of emergency sessions, don't take care of some restriction on voice over LTE services and authorize access to voice over LTE emergency session, whatever. On the next slide, and it is the last example of issue that we detect, is also an issue inside the OEM himself. We have the situation where we don't have voice over LTE roaming agreements, but if I compare to the previous issue, in this case, home networks support voice over LTE services. Then what happened? The networks inform the device during the registrations that no roaming agreement exists, but nevertheless, access to emergency services must be done via voice over LTE emergency sessions. But due to misinterpretation in the device in the OEM sites, roaming is blocked, but also the access to emergency services using voice over LTE technology is blocked. Then it's mandatory to change the behavior inside the OEM. All this issue, and I've just give you 4 examples. It's not the exhaustive list of issues that we detect, but based on the different issue that we detect on the next slides, GSMA decides to put in place a VoLTE task force in Q3 last year. The main objective of this task force was to assure voice over LTE interoperability and emergency call, and in the VRA, Voice Roaming and Emergency Task Force, to clarify the requirements that mobile operators have regarding the voice over LTE emergency calls. We receive a very enthusiastic and positive response from operators, but also to OEM to solve this issue, especially regarding access to emergency service in case of roaming. Then we define together requirements, and a key requirement that we have is the following: a device shall try every means possible to make emergency calls, regardless of restriction requested or made by the networks or operators. including limited state and reduced limited voice capabilities. It is a key element to make sure that all users in roaming situation on a networks closing 2G and 3G networks will be able to access and to reach the emergency services. It is really key. On the next slides, the different actions made in the GSMA to avoid this kind of issue. Inside the network groups and the terminal steering group, we organize a common meeting to align and to be sure that all requirements are fully aligned between networks and device. The result was a couple of change requests on different documents. They are listed in the slide. I will not review all of this change, but the final objective again was to be sure that we have a clear definition of the management of emergency call, emergency sessions, whatever the situation, and especially, oops, okay, it's come back, in case of limited service states. This element was not clear in the 3GPP specification, and the GSMA request via liaison statements to the 3GPP to clarify these points and to improve the specification regarding the situation where the device is in limited service states. 3GPP received this request, and an evolution is currently in actions to be sure that this behavior is correctly defined, clearly defined, and adopted by everybody. This is a very, very important job. You know that the access to emergency services is really key, and it's a service that must be provided to all users, your home user, your roamers, and also mobile user using your networks just to place an emergency call. Thank you for your attentions. If you have questions, don't hesitate. At the end of all the presentation, I will try to answer to your questions, and I forward the floor to Wayne for the next presentation, Wayne from the GSMA service.
Brilliant. Thank you, Eddie. Just to make sure you're still participating, still engaged, we'd like you to take part in a poll which just popped up in your screens. We'll give that a few seconds, and then we'll hand over to Wayne Cutler, the technical director from GSMA, in a second. Wayne, would you like to proceed?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thanks. So I'm going to talk about interop testing and recent enhancements. This first slide lists a bunch of challenges and obstacles to the deployment of VoLTE and VoLTE roaming. These were input into our network and roaming working group in a study about probably 2 years ago now. And the output of that working group underpins the GSMA VoLTE testing. I won't cover all of these issues. I'll just pick out some of them. The biggest problem is the one Eddie's already mentioned about OEM blocking IMS. So this means that the device doesn't so much not interoperate, doesn't even attempt to interoperate because IMS is switched off. Then there's the variation in network settings and the network settings exchange database. So I have a slide on the NSX database later, but this is a database that enables operators to upload their configuration parameters as defined in a document called TS32 into the NSX. It's then downloaded to OEMs. One of these groups are the IMS settings, which control VoLTE. And the complaint we got was that operator settings typically are very similar, but rarely identical. And therefore, OEMs who produce open market devices said, how can we test our devices? Because we can't test against all these different operator settings, even though they're all quite similar. How does this work? And then the last one I mentioned is probably the scalability issue. So we currently have something like, I think it's 485. It's going for 500 LTE networks yet to launch VoLTE. 350 new devices per annum. Obviously, you can't test everything everywhere. Just the numbers just don't stack up. Then you can throw roaming in, it gives you an n squared problem. So there's a big problem to address interoperability and do it in a quick and scalable manner to get these extra networks launched and devices available, etc. Next slide. Thanks. So on the left-hand side, we have the document I-25, which is the document, the output essentially of what was recommended. And in this document, it defines 6 IMS settings, 6 profiles, which are service-based profiles. The services being voice, which includes video, SMS and emergency, and it's whether those services are done via IMS or legacy. We have associated test suites with all of those profiles. We also have a roaming test matrix, so we mix and match all combinations as well. And we recommend operators to adopt one of those 6 profiles. And the profiles are designed to generically test a device. So an open market device would be tested against all 6, and it's maintained that would generically test the IMS functionality on board. In addition, there's been some extra changes recently to do with the VRE task force that Eddie mentions. We've done some extra tests to cover emergency calls in limited service state, etc. We also got some additional feedback from the industry. So we started with 6 profiles, but we're now focusing on 2 of them, namely profile 4 and 6, or the 4th and 6th of the group of 6. And I've got a slide later that'll talk a bit about them. And then the right-hand side, we have the TSG document TS59. This endorsed IR25 and defined an open market device as one that allows VoLTE for an accredited network that's I-25 compliant using a known or supported IMS profile. So the implication is that the network should adopt one of the 6 profiles and the device should support all 6 profiles. Although we also regard that this is covered in the case where a small operator, for example, in a region, copies the profile of a larger operator and the device already supports the profile of the larger operator. So next slide. So these are the 4 different test types that came out of the NRG recommendations and are used in the IOP testing. So starting from the left, we have a network test where we test a real network with a probe that's in territory. The probe looks like a smartphone to the network. It uses the IMS configuration settings of that network. We then have the network roaming test, where the setup is pretty similar to the network test, although in this case we obviously have 2 networks. We also have 1 or 2 probes, depending whether we're doing both way or single way testing, and we'll run respective test suites at each end to match the profiles, etc. The next one is a device test. So we test a real device against a simulated network. So in this case, the test equipment is the network. So it's the RAN, it's the EPC, the HSS, the IMS. And in this case, we test the device against all of the 6 profiles that I mentioned to generically test the IMS capability on board. And also we do roaming as well. So the network can be logically split to do a HPMN and VPMN, and we do all combinations. So it's a thorough test of the device. And then finally, the last one is a network device combo. The setup is similar to the device test, but in this case, the network is an emulation of a real network based on traces obtained from a real network test. And in this case, obviously, we use the IMS configurations of that network. Next slide. Yeah, so along the way, we did also have an evolution of device testing. So we still have the device test and the combo test, and then the one in the middle in bright red. We know, based on feedback from larger OEMs, who basically told us, look, we've got extensive lab facilities and test teams, and we can also self-accredit. We agree to this. So they basically do their own testing in line with IR25, and they provide us with PCAP traces so that we can validate those test cases. And we recommend that they test against Profile 6. Like I said, we are pushing Profile 4 and Profile 6. So we're testing against Profile 6, which actually is a superset of Profile 4, so covers Profile 4 as well. And we recommend, and we request that self-accredited devices then unlock VoLTE for all accredited networks using Profile 4 or 6 in line with the spirit of TS59. Next slide. So this is a list of the companies involved in IOP testing. So all the MNOs and MVNOs on the left-hand side, they've performed a network test, and in some cases, one or more roaming tests. And then what we do, we use our NSX database and the mailing list therein to inform OEMs that these are accredited networks and they should contact the MNO and also unlock devices. We also engage with larger OEMs individually, and the list of OEMs on the right-hand side of the slide. This list is a mixture of those that have done the device test, those that have self-certified, and those that have engaged with the MNOs on the left-hand side following accreditation, where devices have been made available. Extra one-to-one testing has been done to show interoperability towards unlocking devices in that network. And all the test results can be seen on the test results page, which is in those red letters at the bottom. That's actually a hot link. If you click on that, that'll take you to the results page. Next slide. So I mentioned NSX, our configure our parameter sharing database. This enables operators to upload their configuration settings, as I said, from TS32. We currently have over 600 OEMs participating. The idea then they can customize devices, as I said previously. We also, as well as using the NSX database to inform OEMs of accredited networks, we've also added a VoLTE badge or an accredited badge to NSX. So if an OEM downloads a given IMS setting that's been accredited, there'll be a little badge with it or an indicator so that OEM can see that it's an accredited network. Next slide. Yes, so this is really about our end goal, our aim. It's really about, as it says at the top, building confidence and trust, and to get away from one-to-one testing, because we can't do that in all cases. On the MNO point of view, we focus on Profile 4 and Profile 6. They both support SMS over IP. 6 is a superset of 4, and that it includes Wi-Fi. An MNO can start with 6 or start with 4 and migrate. We recognise this is probably aimed at those MNOs who haven't launched yet, although no one's precluded. And then the big part at the end is to engage with OEMs to get devices unlocked on accredited networks. On the OEM side, we really have a multi-pronged strategy. So we We did a self-certification of devices, where they, as I said, they test them themselves and share the traces. We provide them with a certificate, although we do stick an S suffix for self on it. That's just for transparency, so you can tell between a neutral certificate or an independently tested certificate and a self certificate. We continue to promote the device test, probably to smaller manufacturers, although again, no one's precluded. And we're encouraging testing in accredited networks. And thus far, there's probably 3 ways this has been done: via own QA test, where the OEM send a team into territory, via lending devices, lending an unlocked device with an NDA, or probably the most convenient and quickest is whereby the MNO already has an in-handed device, which is then unlocked with the help of the OEM remotely, and then the MNO runs the test themselves and shares traces ahead of unlocking, etc. We also request OEMs to unlock devices for IR25 compliant networks, again in the spirit of TS59. And finally, where we're trying to get to, I think, is to open up devices to adopt a similar strategy as Apple, where they have this non-certified carrier approach for those carriers that they haven't done one-to-one testing. They allow VoLTE anyway and allow VoLTE roaming, but they apply default settings. So we'd like to encourage that to be more widely adopted, where Profile 6 is the adopted profile, the default profile, or else the NSX settings if those settings are present in NSX. And that was my last slide. So I'd like now to hand you over to Osvaldo Montes of Altan Redes, who is a senior core network architecture with that company. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. You hear me?
Yes, nice and clear.
Okay. Please, next slide. Hi to all. I am Osvaldo Montes, Senior Network and Virtualization Manager. I represent a network, Altan Network, in this opportunity. I'm going to tell you a little about the company and how the GSMA services has been useful to achieve the objectives that to date have consolidated us as a leading telecommunication operator. According to the news from an expert on the subject regarding the blackout of 2G and 3G networks in Latin America, Altan is a strong company in Mexico with a wholesale business in LTE Plus technology with a multiple MNOs customers. As you see here, the Altan wholesale network is a unique project in Mexico whose objective is to transform telecommunication in the country close to digital way and promote competitiveness, offering universal, continuous, non-discriminatory 4G voice and data service that will allow easy migration to 5G. Current coverage covers than more 70% with an expectation of covering at least 92.2% of the population coverage in the country in 2025. And in addition, we have international agreements in more than 120 countries. An important differentiation between Altan and traditional operation is the social coverage. As you see, Altan is a unique provider with 4G in more than 60,000 locations, Unix of this unique single provider in 30,000 locations. We have a presence in 87 magic towns in the country. Our coverage is more than 50% of the social coverage plans, more than 95,000 communities with fewer than 5,000 cities already have coverage. On the next slide, you see the main products that we provide to our customers are cellular and mobile data, Internet Home, and Internet of Things. We developed the most disruptive and competitive mobility offer in the Mexican market, where our customers in turn provide these services to their end users. To mention a few of our Walmart, Sky, Easy, Dish, etc. Even with disposable technology network blackout, LTE will continue as the main communication networks, which will be used as a predecessor for migration to the fifth generation. You see, we have here 150 MNOs currently into the network, and we have more than 8 million of the end users. Please, in the next slide. Like other operators around the world, the GSMA interoperability testing has helped us to solve some VoLTE challenges, seeking service improvements, including emergency call testing and SAN certification for device manufacturers. Altan Network has received the interoperability certification in 2022, demonstrating the capacity of these networks is in the different types and combination and IMS profiles that is related here. On the next slide, one of the main problems found was a non-automatic configuration of the Altan APN on Apple devices, for example, which was resolved with the help of the GSMA NSX network setting exchange tool, which provide our information to these manufacturers in order to automate the configuration in recent version of their equipment, resolving and enabling at least 8% for our end user to have these devices in Mexico. That was the principal problem detected. And this is my last slide for any approach to comment regarding this presentation. Please contact me via email. Thank you so much in advance for your time. Please, Connor.
Brilliant. Thank you, Osvaldo. And firstly, I'd like to thank all the speakers for participating today. They're busy gentlemen, and I appreciate you taking the time out of their diaries, because anyone who's ever done these realize the time and effort involved in creating such an event. Hopefully everyone found that of use. We've got a few minutes, and what I want to do is address some of the questions that were in the Q&A, and then for those that we don't cover, we'll address it via email post-event, so you've got them from a reference. So please do keep your questions coming in, as we will answer them on here or via email. First one is probably for you, Emmanuel, from Nicholas. Can we get access to the VoLTE report mentioned?
Yes, you can actually. It's in the GSMA Intelligence website. So I think I pasted the link there, so please feel free to download it and share it and use it. If you have any questions as well, please feel free to reach me out, and I do my best to answer.
Brilliant. Thank you, Manuel. And we'll send that link out along with the slides, so you can refer to it in future. Okay, we have Robson, who says, in the carriers that have done some 2G or 3G shutdown, what is the main reason for keeping some of these layers? Is it CSFB support, legacy machine to machine, or any other reasons? Manuel, Wayne, I don't know who wants to cover that.
I'm happy to quickly answer. I think both the mentioned here, and also it's a very country specific and very region specific question. So on those regions where you have a lot of, or in those countries, for instance, in the Nordic countries, northern part of Europe, you can see a lot of 2G M2M contracts. Or if you see a lot of smart meters or a lot of equipment using 2G, that could be one of the bottleneck. But also CFFB support can be a factor as well. So I think it's very country specific and operator specific, but they are the most important. Wayne, anything else to add from your side?
No, I think you're right. And from the voice point of view, it's probably a case of hanging on to, or having to hang on to CS voice until Summer's VoLTE is available. So I think we probably have cases where operators would like to speed that up, but cannot for various reasons.
Brilliant. Thank you, gents. We've got one from Neil Scully from Vodafone. What steps are required to ensure that VoLTE coverage is as good as 2G and 3G voice coverage? Don't know if anyone wants to take that. Eddie, Wayne, Manuel, Osvaldo. What's the best practice to ensure VoLTE coverage is as good as 2G and 3G voice? Any top tips?
I think we can break this down into a network part. Obviously, you need to have a physical network which is capable to run a VoLTE call. So I think network part is one side. Also, device availability is a very important issue, and obviously huge requirement. And I would also add experience and maturity. So if you're able to optimize your networks, and if you have the experience to what we have most of the operators now, I think that can also help to improve VoLTE coverage.
Brilliant. Thank you, Manuel. One for you, Osvaldo. How does the collaboration work between Altan and GSMA?
The collaboration has been very good. The GSMA have accompanied us throughout the commissioning to be able to standardize the configuration of our operator software to the different device manufacturers, and thus ensure the proper functioning in this network.
Brilliant. Thank you, Osvaldo. Always a nervous moment. Niels has a question. Will VoLTE and VoLTE roaming support also be tracked throughout the device lifecycle, i.e. being enabled by software updates in the GSMA device atlas? Wayne, it's probably most appropriate for you.
That's a good question, isn't it? I hope it is, because so what the issue here is, so we know we have issues about whether the IMS stack is enabled or disabled under various situations, and we also know that this can be changed by patches or OS version upgrade. So I guess what we need to do, and we do have various services, what's called device map, is it, that maps whether a device supports VoLTE, etc., amongst other things. Actually, without looking up device map, I think it's something we should do, and if it's not already in there to this level of granularity, because that's the problem we found when we started looking at the emergency call issues. Like Eddie mentioned, it wasn't a simple case of saying this manufacturer does it right, this manufacturer does it wrong. We often found that the same manufacturer, indeed sometimes the same device with a different operating system version, behaved differently. So actually, it was really complicated to predict device behavior. You had to really drill down. So I think we ought to track it, because part of this is tracking how a device will behave, so people understand what's going to happen. But without actually diving into our device map and what attributes we hold, I'm not sure whether we do go to this level of granularity. But I think we probably need to if we don't.
Thank you, Wayne. I think just conscious of time and everyone's going to disappear. So first, I want to thank everyone for joining today. I hope everyone found it of interest. Please do keep your questions coming in. I'd like to thank the speakers again for making the time and effort to do it, and also all of those of you involved. So we have a whole series of these coming up. Please do get in touch. Please do ask questions. It's a complex world. It's a complex topic, and hopefully collectively we can address it and make it a good experience for everyone. So thank you all very much. I look forward to speaking to you, and have a good day, and speak soon, hopefully. Take care all.
Thanks all.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.